My sister mocked my son wasn't his father's blood and demanded a paternity test, but when I demanded one for her baby, the truth shattered her marriage. My sister, Rachel, 33 years old, has always been the family's troublemaker, but she took things to a whole new level last weekend. For context, I'm Elise, 35 years old, married to Nate, 38 years old, for 15 years. We've got 2 kids, Max, 5 months old, and Ella, 3 years old. Up until now, life had been relatively peaceful, but Rachel decided to turn my dad's 70th birthday into her personal circus. To give you a little backstory on Rachel, she's the type of person who can't stand not being the center of attention. If someone else is in the spotlight, she'll do whatever it takes to shift it back to her. Growing up, she was always the loud one, the dramatic one, the funny one. Except her humor usually came at someone else's expense. Somehow, she's managed to carry that energy into adulthood. So Dad's birthday was supposed to be this big, happy celebration. Mom and I had been planning it for weeks, getting the food, decorations, and guest list just right. Rachel? She didn't help with a single thing. She didn't even please reply until the night before. Typical. The day of the party started off great. We had a mix of family and close friends there, and everyone was in a good mood. Max, my little chatterbox, was running around, telling anyone who would listen about his latest science project. He's obsessed with volcanoes right now, and spent about an hour explaining how he made a lava explosion at school. Even Dad, who usually isn't one for long conversations with kids, was totally entertained. Then, just as Dad was starting his speech to thank everyone for coming, Rachel waltzed in. And I mean waltzed. She was an hour late, but instead of sneaking in quietly, she made a grand entrance, heels clicking, oversized sunglasses perched on her head, and this dramatic scarf that looked like it belonged at a fashion show, not a backyard party. The whole vibe shifted. People stopped what they were doing to look at her, and Dad paused mid-sentence. Instead of apologizing for being late, she laughed and said, "Sorry, I got caught up, you know how it is." "No, Rachel, we don't." Once she was there, it felt like everything had to revolve around her. She started making comments about the decorations. Cute, but a little basic, don't you think? She critiqued the food. This salad could use more seasoning. She even made a joke about the music being something from the Stone Age. But the real drama started during dinner. Everyone was sitting around the table, enjoying the meal and chatting. Max, being his adorable self, continued telling everyone about this new book he's reading on dinosaurs. He was so animated and excited, and everyone was smiling and listening. Everyone except Rachel, of course. She was rolling her eyes and looking at her phone, clearly annoyed that the attention wasn't on her. Rachel leaned over to her husband Jake and said in this exaggerated whisper, but loud enough for the whole table to hear, "Isn't it funny how Max doesn't look like Nate? He kind of looks like Alex, doesn't he? Alex is my ex-boyfriend from college. We dated for a few years, but it ended ages ago. Nate knows about Alex, of course, it's not some big secret. But for Rachel to bring him up like that, in front of everyone, it was so calculated." The table went silent. Nate froze, his fork hovering midair. I could feel my face getting hot, and I blurted out, "What's that supposed to mean, Rachel?" She shrugged. All fake innocence. "Oh, nothing. I was just joking. Don't be so serious." But the damage was done. Nate didn't say a word. He just stared at his plate, his jaw tight. My dad awkwardly tried to change the subject, and everyone else started murmuring to each other. Rachel, meanwhile, looked thrilled. The rest of the dinner was a blur. I couldn't even taste my food because I was so angry. Every time I glanced at Nate, he was quiet, his face blank, but I could tell he was stewing. And Rachel? She was laughing and chatting like nothing had happened. After dinner, I pulled her aside. "What is wrong with you?" I hissed. She looked at me like I was overreacting. "What? It was just a joke." "No, it wasn't," I snapped. "You know exactly what you were doing. Why would you say something like that in front of Nate, in front of everyone?" Rachel rolled her eyes. "Oh, please. If it's not true, why are you so defensive? You're acting like I accused you of something. You basically did," I shot back. "You just implied my son might not be Nate's. Do you even understand how hurtful that is?" But she just smirked. "Relax, Elise. You're making a big deal out of nothing." At that point, I knew there was no getting through to her. Rachel doesn't apologize. She doesn't admit she's wrong. She just stirs up drama and watches the fallout like it's her personal reality show. Nate and I left the party early. I barely even said goodbye to Dad, which made me feel awful, but I couldn't stay another minute. I grabbed Max and Ella, and we bolted. The car ride home was completely silent. I kept glancing at Nate, hoping he'd say something, anything, but he just stared out the window. I felt like screaming. When we got home and put the kids to bed, I finally asked, "Do you believe her?" He didn't answer right away. Finally, he said, "Of course not. But if it's so ridiculous, why not just take a paternity test and prove her wrong?" I stared at him, my heart sinking. "Are you serious? You think I need to prove something that's not even true?" He shifted uncomfortably. "I trust you, Elise, but Rachel's sneaky." What if nothing?" I snapped. "You're supposed to trust me, not her." We went to bed without resolving anything. I couldn't sleep. I just lay there staring at the ceiling, feeling like my world had shifted. Rachel had planted a seed of doubt, and I could feel it growing. The next morning, I woke up hoping the tension from last night would magically disappear. But of course, it didn't. Nate had already gotten up and was in the kitchen with Max and Ella. The kids were chattering away about pancakes, but Nate was unusually quiet. It wasn't his usual still waking up quiet. It was that heavy, awkward silence that had been hanging around since Rachel's stupid comment at the party. I poured myself some coffee and tried to act normal, but it was hard to ignore the elephant in the room. Nate was playing along with Max and laughing at his little jokes, but I could see the wheels turning in his head. I knew he was still thinking about it. It was driving me crazy. I mean, I knew the truth. I had nothing to hide, but Rachel's words had done their damage. She planted this ridiculous idea in Nate's head, and I couldn't figure out how to undo it. Later that day, after the kids went down for their naps, I finally brought it up. "So, are we going to talk about it?" I asked, trying to sound calm, even though I felt anything but. Nate sighed and ran a hand through his hair. "Talk about what?" he said, like he didn't know exactly what I was talking about. "You know what," I said, Rachel's comment. He leaned back on the couch, avoiding eye contact. "I told you, I trust you, Elise," he said after a long pause. "Do you?" I pressed. "Because it doesn't feel like it. You've barely said 2 words to me since last night." He finally looked at me, and I could see the conflict in his eyes. "It's not that I don't trust you," he said, "but Rachel, she's always been sneaky. What if she knows something we don't?" That hit me like a slap in the face. "What are you even talking about?" I snapped. "Rachel doesn't know anything. She was just stirring up drama like she always does." Nate didn't respond right away. When he finally did, he said, "I just think if it's not true, then why not take a test and put this to rest?" I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Because I shouldn't have to prove anything to you," I said. "Max is your son, Nate. End of story. You either trust me or you don't." He didn't say anything, and that silence was louder than any argument we could have had. The rest of the day was tense. We tried to keep things normal for the kids, but it was clear something was off. Max, being the observant little kid he is, even asked me at one point, "Mommy, are you mad at Daddy?" I told him I wasn't, but the truth was, I was furious. By the end of the weekend, the tension was unbearable. Nate was still stuck in his head. I hated it. Our marriage had always been solid, but Rachel's comment had shaken something loose, and I didn't know how to fix it. The worst part was, I couldn't stop thinking about it either, not because I believed there was any truth to what Rachel said, but because it felt so unfair. I hadn't done anything wrong, and yet here I was, stuck in this mess she created. It didn't help that Nate started acting distant. He wasn't outright accusing me of anything, but there was this weird tension between us that wouldn't go away. Every time we had a minor disagreement about what to make for dinner, or whether Max should watch another episode of his favorite show, it felt like there was this unspoken thing hanging over us. And then there was Rachel. She hadn't reached out since the party, which wasn't surprising. She probably thought she'd done her job and could sit back and watch the chaos unfold. That's the thing about Rachel. She loves to stir the pot, but she never sticks around to deal with the aftermath. My mom, on the other hand, called me the day after the party to check in. She'd noticed that we left early and wanted to make sure everything was okay. "We're fine," I lied, "just tired." Mom paused like she didn't quite believe me. "You know Rachel didn't mean anything by it, right?" she said. I almost laughed. "Didn't mean anything by it?" "Mom, she basically implied that Max isn't Nate's kid in front of the entire family." Mom sighed. She was just joking, Elise. You know how Rachel is. She doesn't think before she speaks. That's not an excuse, I said. She knew exactly what she was doing. Well, Mom said after another long pause. You know how she gets. She probably just felt left out. Everyone was doting on Max, and she probably wanted some attention. I didn't have the energy to argue with her, so I just said, yeah, maybe, and ended the call. But inside, I was seething. Rachel didn't feel left out. She wasn't some innocent kid acting out for attention. She was a grown woman who deliberately tried to mess with my family, and she'd succeeded. The days that followed were tough. Nate and I weren't fighting outright, but there was this undercurrent of tension in everything we did. Every time I looked at him, I could tell he was still thinking about Rachel's comment, even if he wouldn't admit it. By the end of the week, I was at my breaking point. Something had to give, but I didn't know what. All I knew was that Rachel had planted a seed of doubt, and it was growing like a weed, threatening to choke everything Nate and I had built. I don't even know where to start with this part because honestly, it still feels surreal. I never thought my marriage would come to this. The idea of taking a paternity test for Max, my son, our son, felt like such a slap in the face. But the tension at home was getting worse, and I didn't know what else to do. Nate wasn't outright accusing me of anything, but his behavior said it all. He started being distant, like emotionally checking out, and I hated it. It's not like he was cold or mean. He was still helping with the kids, still doing his usual routine, but there was this wall between us that I couldn't break down. Every time I tried to talk to him about it, it just made things worse. I told you, I trust you, he kept saying, but actions speak louder than words, and his actions screamed the opposite. I caught him staring at Max more than usual, like he was looking for some proof in his face. At one point I found him flipping through old photo albums, looking at pictures from when Max was a baby. Do you think you'll find something in there that'll suddenly convince you he's your son? I snapped one day. Nate looked up at me, startled. Elise, I'm just looking at photos, relax. Don't tell me to relax, I said, my voice shaking. You've been weird ever since Rachel opened her big mouth, and it's not fair. Not to me and definitely not to Max. I'm not saying it's fair, Nate said. But it's not like I can just turn off my thoughts, okay? That was his excuse every time. That he couldn't help it. And maybe he couldn't. But it felt like he wasn't even trying. I was stuck in this nightmare where my husband, the man I'd trusted with my life for over a decade, was suddenly questioning my integrity. Meanwhile, Max was starting to pick up on the tension. He's a smart kid, and he knows when something's off. He started asking more questions like, why does Daddy look so serious all the time? Or are you and Daddy mad at each other? I'd always reassure him, but it broke my heart. This wasn't his problem to deal with. He deserved a happy, loving home, not whatever this mess was. The breaking point came one night after another argument. It wasn't even a big fight. It started with something stupid like what to eat for dinner, but it quickly spiraled into something bigger. I don't know how much longer I can live like this, I said finally, throwing up my hands. What do you want me to do? Nate asked, his voice rising for the first time. Just pretend Rachel never said anything? Pretend those doubts aren't there? Yes, I shouted. That's exactly what I want you to do because those doubts are ridiculous and they're hurting our family. Nate shook his head. You keep saying they're ridiculous, but if that's true, why not take the test? If it's all nonsense, what's the harm in proving it? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. The harm, Nate, is that you're making me prove something I shouldn't have to prove. Do you not understand how humiliating that is? How insulting? He didn't answer, just looked at me with that same conflicted expression I'd been seeing for days. And that's when I realized he wasn't going to let this go. No matter how much I argued, no matter how many times I told him he was wrong, he wouldn't be satisfied until he had proof. The next morning, I made the decision. It wasn't about Nate anymore, it was about Max. I couldn't let this tension fester any longer, not when it was starting to affect our kids. If taking the stupid test would bring peace back to our home, then fine, I'd do it. When I told Nate, he seemed relieved, which honestly hurt more than anything. He didn't apologize, didn't say he'd changed his mind. He just nodded and said, I think it's for the best. For the best? Yeah, sure. The process itself was straightforward. We went to a clinic where they swabbed Max's cheek, then Nate's, then mine. Max thought it was some kind of fun science experiment, which made me feel even worse. He had no idea what was really going on, and I prayed he'd never find out. The wait for the results was excruciating. It was only a few days, but it felt like an eternity. Every time I looked at Nate, I felt this wave of anger and sadness. How did we get here? How did my marriage, my family, come to this point? When the results finally came in, I was the one who opened the envelope. Nate sat across from me looking tense, while I unfolded the paper with shaking hands, and there it was, in black and white, a 99.9% match. Max was Nate's son, just like I'd always known. I handed the paper to Nate without a word. He read it, then looked up at me, his face full of guilt. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "Sorry?" I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "You're sorry?" "I shouldn't have doubted you," he said. "I let Rachel get in my head, and I shouldn't have. I wanted to yell at him, to tell him exactly how much he'd hurt me, but I couldn't. I was too tired. The fight had drained me completely, and all I could do was sit there in silence." Over the next few days, Nate tried to make it up to me. He apologized again and again, saying he'd never let Rachel's words get to him again. But the damage was done. I couldn't look at him the same way, not yet. Meanwhile, my mom called to check in, and I told her about the test. Her response? "Well, at least now Nate knows the truth." "The truth?" I snapped. "The truth hasn't changed, Mom. It was always the truth. The test didn't prove anything I didn't already know." Mom tried to backpedal, but it didn't matter. She didn't get it. No one did, except maybe me. Rachel had done what she set out to do. She'd planted doubt in Nate's mind, and that doubt had nearly torn us apart. And Rachel? She still hadn't reached out. Not a single call, not a single text, nothing. I thought about confronting her, about telling her exactly how much damage she'd caused. But what was the point? Rachel doesn't care about anyone but herself. She'd probably just laugh it off and say it was just a joke. But it wasn't a joke, not to me and not to Nate. I was still stewing over everything that happened with the paternity test when I decided I couldn't just let Rachel walk away from this unscathed. She'd almost destroyed my marriage and our family's peace with her disgusting joke, and the fact that she hadn't even reached out to apologize made it clear she didn't care. So I did what any reasonable, slightly petty person would do. I started digging. I wasn't even sure what I was looking for at first. I just wanted to find something, anything, that would show the world Rachel wasn't as perfect as she liked to pretend. Rachel has always been the kind of person who loves social media. Her Instagram is filled with perfectly curated photos of her life, fancy brunches, vacations, gym selfies, the works. But as I scrolled through her feed, something struck me as odd. For someone who spends so much time showing off, there were barely any photos of her and her husband Jake. Curious, I checked out Jake's profile too. It was sparse, which wasn't surprising since he's more of a low-key guy, but even there, something felt off. He hadn't posted anything about Rachel or their life together in months. It was like they were living completely separate lives online. That's when I started to think, if Rachel was hiding something, it wouldn't be on her public Instagram. She's not stupid, she knows how to keep up appearances. I decided to look further. I created a fake Facebook account. Nothing too obvious, just enough to fly under the radar, and started poking around. Rachel had 2 Facebook profiles, which I found interesting. One was her main account, which she barely used anymore. The other was an older account she'd apparently abandoned. I sent a friend request to her older account and was shocked when she accepted it within a few hours. That's when things started to get interesting. The groups she was in were the first red flag. I expected to see the usual stuff. Mom groups, fitness communities, maybe some cooking tips, but no. Rachel was in a bunch of private groups that made my jaw drop. One group was literally dedicated to infidelity, with posts like how to keep your side piece a secret and signs your husband is starting to suspect. I couldn't believe my eyes. Rachel was actively commenting in these groups, giving advice like, "Always have a backup story, ladies, and use a different name on dating apps. Trust me, it works." It was sickening. She was out here wrecking her own marriage while nearly destroying mine, and she acted like it was some kind of game. But wait, it gets worse. As I kept scrolling through her Facebook activity, I noticed a name that kept popping up, Brandon. He wasn't in her friend list, but he was in the same groups, and they were interacting a lot. I decided to dig deeper, and sure enough, Rachel was messaging Brandon privately. Rachel wasn't just cheating online, she had an OnlyFans account. I couldn't believe it when I first found it. At first I thought, this can't be Rachel, there's no way. But as I scrolled through her content, there was no denying it. It was her face, her voice, her everything. She was using a fake name, but it didn't take much detective work to connect the dots. Rachel wasn't just posting risque photos, she was doing full-on explicit content and charging people for private messages and custom videos. And guess who her biggest fan was? Brandon. I was floored. This woman had been pretending to be the perfect wife, stirring up drama in my life and accusing me of infidelity, while running a double life as some kind of OnlyFans star. At this point, I wasn't even sure what to do with all this information. Part of me wanted to send it all to Jake right away, but another part of me hesitated. I didn't want to destroy his world without being sure of my next move. Things got even messier when Rachel announced she was pregnant. She made this big deal about it on Instagram, posting a picture of her ultrasound with the caption, "Our little blessing is on the way." The timing couldn't have been worse. For one thing, Rachel and Jake had been trying for a baby for years with no luck. She used to complain about it all the time, saying it was unfair how easily other people got pregnant while she couldn't. So when she finally announced she was expecting, everyone was thrilled, except me, because I knew the truth. I'd seen her messages to Brandon. I'd seen the videos, the photos, the comments. I knew Rachel was lying to everyone, pretending this baby was Jake's, when there was a very real chance it wasn't. I decided to gather more evidence before making a move. I joined the infidelity groups under my fake account and started interacting with Rachel and Brandon. I pretended to be someone else entirely, asking for advice on how to handle an affair. Rachel was more than happy to help, of course, giving me all kinds of tips on how to avoid getting caught. Through these conversations, I learned even more about her relationship with Brandon. They'd met through OnlyFans, but it had quickly turned into something more. She'd been meeting him in person for months, sneaking off whenever Jake was out of town or busy with work. One message from Brandon stuck out to me. "I can't wait to meet our baby. I hope she looks like you." I felt sick. Rachel wasn't just lying to Jake, she was setting him up to raise a child that wasn't even his, and she was doing it without a shred of guilt. At this point, I knew I had to confront her. She had gone too far, and there was no way I could sit back and let her get away with it. But I also wanted to do it in a way that would make her squirm. She deserved to feel even a fraction of the humiliation she'd caused me. And so, I started planning. When my mom told me she was throwing Rachel a gender reveal party, I almost choked on my coffee. A party for Rachel after all the crap she pulled? It felt like a slap in the face. But my mom, being my mom, was all about keeping the peace and treating everyone equally. "Elise," she said in her usual calming tone, "we threw a party for you when you were pregnant with Max. It's only fair we do the same for Rachel." "Fair?" I scoffed. "Mom, this isn't about fairness. She's a liar and a troublemaker, and you're rewarding her with a party." Mom sighed. "I know Rachel has her flaws, but she's family. And now that she's pregnant, maybe this will soften her, help her grow up a little." I wanted to scream, "Mom, she's literally living a double life," but I didn't. At that point, I wasn't ready to reveal what I knew, not yet. Instead, I bit my tongue and said, "Fine, have your party. But don't expect me to pretend everything's okay. Can you at least come?" Mom asked, sounding tired. I thought about it. On one hand, I didn't want to be anywhere near Rachel. On the other hand, this was the perfect opportunity to confront her. If she could humiliate me in front of the family, why couldn't I return the favor? "Yeah, I'll come," I said. "But don't expect me to keep quiet if she starts her usual nonsense." The party was set for the following weekend. And Rachel, of course, milked it for all it was worth. She posted about it non-stop on social media, so blessed to have such a supportive family, and can't wait to celebrate our little miracle. It made me want to puke. When the day finally arrived, I put on my game face and headed to my parents' house with Nate and the kids. Nate was still trying to repair things between us after the whole paternity test fiasco, so he was on his best behavior. He even said, "Let's just get through this for your mom's sake," which I appreciated. The party was typical Rachel, over the top and attention-seeking. There were pink and blue decorations everywhere, a huge balloon arch, and even a catered buffet. Rachel was in full princess mode, floating around the room in a flowy dress that screamed, "Look at me!" Jake was there too, smiling and acting excited, but I could tell something was off. He seemed detached, like he was going through the motions. I wondered if he suspected anything or if Rachel had him completely fooled. As the party went on, I stayed in the background, watching and waiting. Rachel was eating up all the attention, going on and on about baby names and nursery themes. Every time someone asked her a question, she'd answer with this sickly sweet smile, like she was the perfect mom to be. But then came the big moment, the balloon pop. Everyone gathered around as Rachel and Jake stood in the center, holding a big black balloon. When they popped it, pink confetti exploded everywhere. "It's a girl!" Rachel squealed, clapping her hands like a child. Everyone cheered and clapped, and for a moment, I almost felt bad for what I was about to do. Almost. After the excitement died down and people started mingling again, I saw my chance. Rachel was chatting with a group of friends, soaking up their compliments when I walked over. "So, Rachel," I said, loudly enough for the group to hear, "have you told Jake about Brandon yet?" The conversation stopped. Rachel froze, her smile faltering for the first time all day. "What are you talking about?" she said, her voice tight. "You know exactly what I'm talking about," I said, crossing my arms. "Brandon, the guy you've been chatting with on Facebook. The guy who's been paying for your OnlyFans content. The guy who might actually be the father of your baby." The color drained from Rachel's face. "You're insane," she snapped. "You're making this up." "Am I said, pulling out my phone. I'd saved screenshots of her messages with Brandon, her OnlyFans account, and even some of the more incriminating comments she'd left in those cheating groups. I handed my phone to Jake and said, "Take a look." Jake hesitated for a moment, then took the phone. As he scrolled through the screenshots, his expression changed from confusion to shock to anger. "Rachel," he said finally, his voice low. "What the hell is this?" Rachel started stammering, her hands fluttering like she was trying to grab the words out of the air. It's not what it looks like," she said. "It looks like you've been lying to me," Jake said, his voice rising. "It looks like you've been cheating on me." By now the entire party had gone silent. Everyone was watching, their faces a mix of curiosity and horror. Rachel, clearly panicking, turned on me. "You're such a jealous bitch," she spat. "You've been obsessed with ruining my life ever since the paternity test." I didn't flinch. "No, Rachel, you ruined your own life. I just exposed the truth." Jake threw the phone onto the nearest table, his face red with anger. "Is the baby even mine?" he demanded. "Of course she's yours," Rachel shouted, tears streaming down her face. "I would never, then take a paternity test," Jake interrupted. "Prove it." Rachel's mouth opened and closed like a fish. She looked around the room, as if hoping someone would come to her rescue, but no one did, not even our mom, who stood frozen in the corner, her hand over her mouth. "I don't need to prove anything to you," Rachel said finally, her voice shaking. Jake let out a bitter laugh. "That's what I thought." He turned and walked out, slamming the door behind him. Rachel collapsed onto a chair, sobbing, while the rest of us stood there in stunned silence. I expected my mom to start lecturing me about how I shouldn't have done this at the party. But she didn't. She just stared at Rachel, her expression a mix of disappointment and disbelief. After a few minutes, Nate walked over to me and said quietly, "Maybe we should go." "Yeah," I said, my voice steady. "I think we're done here." As we left, I couldn't help but feel a sense of relief. For the first time in weeks, I felt like the weight on my shoulders had lifted. Rachel had spent her whole life tearing people down, but this time, she'd torn herself down. After the gender reveal party, things spiraled for Rachel faster than even I could have predicted. Jake left her that night and didn't come back. Apparently, he went to stay with a friend, and when my mom called to check on him, he told her he wouldn't be stepping foot in that house until Rachel took a paternity test. Rachel, true to form, refused. She dug her heels in and played the victim, acting like Jake was the bad guy for even asking. How dare he doubt me? She told my mom over the phone, sobbing loud enough for everyone in the room to hear. But her refusal only made things worse. Jake wasn't an idiot. He'd seen the screenshots, read the messages. He knew there was more to the story than Rachel was letting on, and honestly, so did everyone else. My parents were devastated. They'd always tried to see the best in Rachel, no matter how awful she acted, but this was a new low. My dad, who usually stayed out of family drama, sat her down one evening and said, "Rachel, if you don't take the test, you're going to lose your husband. Is that what you want?" Her response? "Maybe I don't want him anymore." That shut my dad up real quick. He didn't know what to say to that, and honestly, neither did anyone else. Meanwhile, Rachel was still clinging to her double life, but cracks were starting to show. People in our extended family had started whispering about the drama, and it wasn't long before her OnlyFans account came to light. I didn't have to say a word. Someone else found it and shared the link around. Rachel tried to deny it, of course. "It's not me," she said, even though her face was literally all over it. "Someone must have photoshopped this to make me look bad. No one bought it." Then came the ultimate twist. After Rachel gave birth a few months later, my mom called me the morning it happened, her voice shaky. "The baby's here," she said. "Okay," I replied cautiously. "And she doesn't look like Jake," Mom said quietly. "Not even a little." I wasn't surprised. I'd been waiting for this moment, knowing it would eventually come. Still, hearing it confirmed made my stomach drop a little. "What are you going to do?" I asked. Mom sighed. "I don't know. Rachel's refusing to admit anything, and Jake still won't talk to her. He says he's filing for divorce if she doesn't take the test." "Good for him," I said. It didn't take long for Jake to follow through on his threat. A week after the baby was born, he officially filed for divorce. Rachel, predictably, blamed me for everything. "This is all your fault," she screamed over the phone one night. "If you hadn't meddled, none of this would have happened." "None of this would have happened if you hadn't lied," I shot back. "Maybe try taking some responsibility for once in your life." She hung up on me after that, which was fine by me. I was done wasting my energy on her nonsense. But Rachel wasn't done with her games. She started spreading rumors about me to anyone who would listen. According to her, I was a vindictive bitch who'd been jealous of her my whole life. She even tried to drag Nate into it, claiming he'd always had a thing for her and that's why I was so eager to take her down. It was laughable, honestly. Nate couldn't stand Rachel, and everyone knew it. Her attempts to smear me only made her look more desperate. The real nail in the coffin came when my mom overheard Rachel on the phone with Brandon. She'd gone to Rachel's house to help with the baby, because my mom, bless her heart, still couldn't bring herself to completely give up on her, and heard Rachel talking in the other room. "She's beautiful, isn't she?" Rachel was saying. "I hope she looks more like me than you, though. I don't want anyone getting suspicious." My mom confronted her right then and there. "Rachel, is Brandon the father?" she asked, her voice shaking. Rachel denied it at first, but eventually she broke down. "Fine, yes, okay. Brandon's the father. Are you happy now?" "Happy? No." My mom was heartbroken. She called me that night and told me everything, and for the first time in years I heard real anger in her voice. "She's ruined everything," Mom said. "Her marriage, her reputation, our family. I don't know what to do anymore." "She's not your responsibility," I told her. "Let her deal with the mess she's made," and that's exactly what happened. Jake finalized the divorce within months and cut all ties with Rachel. Brandon, predictably, wanted nothing to do with her or the baby. Rachel was left completely on her own. My parents, after a lot of soul-searching, decided to step back as well. They helped her financially for a little while, but when it became clear that Rachel wasn't interested in changing, they finally let go. As for me, I've moved on. My marriage with Nate isn't perfect. It's hard to completely bounce back from something like this, but we're working on it. We've started going to couples therapy, and I feel like we're finally rebuilding the trust that Rachel tried so hard to destroy. Rachel, on the other hand, is a cautionary tale. She spent so much time tearing other people down that she didn't realize she was destroying herself in the process. Now she's alone, struggling to raise a child on her own, with no one left to blame but herself. And honestly, that's exactly what she deserves.